At my niece's birthday party, my wife's sister held down my 10-year-old daughter and chopped her hair off so she wouldn't outshine her daughter. My wife said, "Don't make a scene." I didn't. I did this. The next day, they were crying at the police station. Look, I'm not saying all kids' birthday parties are a waste of time and frosting, but if you've ever walked into one and immediately felt your blood pressure spike while clowns juggle nearby, you know exactly what I'm talking about. My niece Emma's 10th birthday party was supposed to be one of those wholesome family gatherings where everyone smiles for Instagram and pretends their lives aren't held together with coffee and lies. Instead, it turned into the kind of event that makes you question whether humanity deserves nice things or if we should just go back to celebrating birthdays with a single candle and a firm handshake. I should have known something was off the moment I pulled into the driveway and saw the decorations. We're talking about balloons in every color of the rainbow, a banner that screamed Emma's magical day, in glitter letters that probably cost more than my car payment, and one of those inflatable bounce houses that looked like it could double as a small aircraft hangar. The whole setup screamed Pinterest mom on a mission. And let me tell you, those are the most dangerous moms of all. They're the ones who show up to school functions with homemade organic snacks and judge you for bringing store-bought cookies like you just committed a war crime. I was carrying a tray of cupcakes that my wife Lila had insisted we bring, even though I'd argued that showing up empty-handed would have been perfectly acceptable since we were already gifting Emma a bike that cost more than my first car. But no, apparently bringing food is some kind of unspoken rule in the suburban parent handbook that nobody bothered to give me when Zoe was born. My daughter was walking right beside me, and I've got to say, she looked absolutely perfect. Zoe had spent an hour that morning getting ready, which for a 10-year-old is basically the equivalent of preparing for the Met Gala. Her hair was done up in these long, gorgeous curls that cascaded down her back like she'd just stepped out of a shampoo commercial, and she was wearing this white dress with little flowers on it that made her look like an actual Disney princess. Not the knockoff kind you see at sketchy birthday party venues, but the real deal. She was polite, well-mannered, and radiating that innocent kid energy that makes you remember why you tolerate the chaos of parenthood in the first place. The party was already in full swing when we walked into the backyard, which had been transformed into what I can only describe as a carnival meets a sugar factory. There were at least 30 kids running around like they'd been injected with pure chaos, parents clustered in groups pretending to have conversations while secretly watching their kids like hawks to make sure nobody ended up in the emergency room, and a table loaded with enough junk food to send every dentist in a 10-mile radius into early retirement. I spotted my wife's sister Crystal almost immediately because she has this talent for making an entrance that screams, "Look at me," or else. She was wearing white jeans and a blouse that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget, strutting around like she was hosting her own reality show called Mean Moms of Suburbia. Her daughter Emma was by her side, looking cute but nowhere near as put together as Zoe, which should have been my first warning sign that this day was about to go sideways faster than a shopping cart with a broken wheel. I did my social duty, smiled at people I barely knew, made small talk about the weather and how fast kids grow up these days, and generally played the role of pleasant family man at a kid's party that society expects you to perform. Zoe was having a great time, playing with her cousins and other kids, being her usual sweet self. And that's when the compliments started rolling in. One mom came up and gushed about how beautiful Zoe's hair was, asking what products we used like I had any clue about hair care beyond shampoo exists. Another parent commented on how well-behaved she was, and an aunt I barely recognized went on a 5-minute tangent about how Zoe looked like she belonged in a magazine. Normal stuff, right? Just people being nice to a kid at a party. Except Crystal was watching and listening, and I could see her face doing that thing where someone's trying to smile, but their eyes are telling a completely different story, like when you're at work and your boss says, "We're all a family here," right before announcing layoffs. Emma wasn't getting the same attention, and Crystal was taking mental notes like a detective building a case. I noticed her jaw tighten every time someone praised Zoe, saw her grip her wine glass a little harder, watched her force out these fake laughs that sounded like someone strangling a hyena. But hey, I figured she was an adult who could handle the fact that sometimes other kids get compliments at parties. I mean, Emma was the birthday girl. She was getting plenty of attention. This wasn't a competition. Turns out, I was wrong. Dead wrong. Competition show on cable television wrong. About 10 minutes after the compliment parade, I was standing by the food table, debating whether eating a fourth mini hot dog would be socially acceptable or cross the line into concerning dad behavior, when I heard Zoe call out, "Aunt Crystal," in that confused, slightly worried voice that every parent knows means something's not right. I turned around just in time to see Crystal kneeling down behind Zoe, holding her by the shoulders with one hand, and in the other hand, I kid you not, she had a pair of those rounded safety scissors that kindergartners use for construction paper projects. Before I could even process what was happening, before my brain could catch up with my eyes, Crystal started cutting, just hacking away at Zoe's beautiful curls like she was trimming a hedge that had personally offended her family. The backyard went quiet. Not movie quiet, but that real-life quiet where everyone stops talking at exactly the same moment, because something so bizarre is happening that human brains need a second to reboot. I watched chunks of my daughter's hair fall to the ground in slow motion, saw Zoe's face go from confusion to shock to the kind of hurt that makes your chest feel like someone's squeezing it in a vice. Other parents were frozen, mouths open, nobody quite sure if this was some weird party game or if they were witnessing an actual crime being committed at a children's birthday party. I dropped my plate. I think I stopped breathing for a second. My legs moved before my brain gave them permission, and I was across that yard faster than I've moved since high school gym class. I pulled Zoe away from Crystal, who had this wild look in her eyes like she'd just woken up from sleepwalking and wasn't quite sure how she got there. My daughter was crying, touching the jagged, uneven mess that used to be her hair, and I felt this rage building up inside me like a volcano that had been dormant for years and just remembered it was supposed to be erupting. That's when Lila appeared next to me, her hand on my arm, her voice low and urgent in my ear. "Marcus, don't make a scene. Please. Not here. Not now." She was looking at me with those eyes that said she knew exactly what I was thinking, knew I was about 2 seconds away from turning this birthday party into something that would require police intervention and probably therapy for multiple children. Crystal was stammering something about just evening it out, and didn't mean to, while her husband Doug stood there looking like he wished the earth would open up and swallow him whole. I looked at my daughter's tear-streaked face, at the hair scattered on the grass like evidence at a crime scene, at Crystal's fake apologetic expression that wouldn't fool a parking meter, and at Lila pleading with me silently to just let it go, to be the bigger person, to not ruin everyone's day. And you know what I did? I took a deep breath. I wiped Zoe's tears with my thumb. I smiled. Actually smiled. Walked over to the food table, picked up a cupcake with pink frosting, and ate it slowly while everyone watched me like I was a bomb that hadn't decided whether to explode yet. "Great party, Crystal," I said, my voice so calm it scared me a little. "Really memorable." Then I took Zoe's hand, told Lila we were leaving, and walked out of that backyard with my head high and my heart racing. Because here's the thing about making a scene that nobody tells you. Sometimes the scariest thing you can do isn't losing your temper. It's keeping it. It's staying quiet while everyone expects you to explode. It's smiling while mentally drafting a police report that's going to make their next few months very, very interesting. I didn't make a scene that day, but I was absolutely going to make a case. The car ride home was the kind of quiet that makes you wish someone would just scream and get it over with. Zoe sat in the back seat, staring out the window with her hand touching what was left of her hair every few seconds, like she kept hoping it would magically grow back if she checked enough times. Lila was in the passenger seat doing that thing where she pretends to look at her phone, but is actually trying to figure out how to spin a disaster into something manageable, which is basically her superpower as a PR manager. Me? I was gripping the steering wheel so hard I'm pretty sure I left permanent fingerprints in the leather, driving exactly the speed limit because the last thing I needed was to get pulled over while looking like I was planning someone's demise. Which, let's be honest, I absolutely was. We got home and Zoe went straight to her room without saying a word. Didn't ask for a snack, didn't turn on the TV, didn't do any of the normal after-party routine stuff that kids do. She just walked upstairs with her shoulders hunched like she was carrying the weight of every bad haircut in human history, and closed her door with this soft click that somehow hurt worse than if she'd slammed it. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening to the sound of my 10-year-old daughter crying, and I felt something inside me shift. You know that moment in movies where the hero realizes they can't just walk away from injustice anymore? Yeah, it was like that, Except instead of dramatic music, there was just the hum of our refrigerator and Lila behind me saying we needed to talk. We ended up in the kitchen, which is apparently the designated battlefield for every serious marital discussion in American households. Lila started making tea, which should have been my first warning sign because she only makes tea when she's about to say something she knows I won't like and needs her hands busy so she doesn't have to make eye contact. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, waiting for whatever rationalization was about to come my way. Marcus, she started, and I already knew I was going to hate the next sentence. It's just hair. It'll grow back. Just hair. Just hair. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from saying something I'd regret, because let me tell you, comparing my daughter's traumatic assault by scissors to a simple bad haircut was like saying the Titanic had a minor leak. But I didn't explode. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her with this expression that must have been pretty intense because she actually took a step back. You're right, I said, my voice so level it could have been used by construction workers to hang pictures. It's just hair. And Mount Vesuvius was just steam. The Hindenburg was just a little spark. The Titanic just needed a better GPS. Don't be dramatic, Lila said. But her voice had that edge to it that told me she knew she'd stepped in it. I'm not saying what Crystal did was okay. Obviously it wasn't. But making this into some huge thing isn't going to help Zoe. She needs us to show her it's not a big deal, so she doesn't develop some kind of complex about it. I stared at her like she'd just suggested we solve world hunger by telling everyone to stop being hungry. Not a big deal. Lila, your sister held our daughter down and cut off her hair at a birthday party in front of 30 people because she was jealous. That's not a parenting disagreement or a difference in discipline styles. That's assault. That's the kind of thing that shows up on police reports and therapy bills. She waved her hand like she was swatting away my concern along with an annoying fly. Police reports? Marcus, she's family. You can't seriously be thinking about involving the police over a haircut. Watch me, I said, and I meant it. But here's the thing about being married for 12 years. You learn when to pick your battles and when to just shut up and let your actions speak louder than any argument could. So I didn't say anything else. I just nodded, kissed her on the forehead like we'd reached some kind of understanding, and went upstairs to check on Zoe. My daughter was lying on her bed, face down in her pillow, and the sound of her crying made my heart feel like someone was squeezing it with pliers. I sat down on the edge of her bed and put my hand on her back, feeling her little shoulders shake with each sob. What do you even say in that moment? Every dad joke and piece of fatherly wisdom in my arsenal felt completely useless against the reality that someone had hurt my kid and I hadn't been able to stop it. She finally turned over and looked at me with those red, puffy eyes that made me want to drive back to Crystal's house and have a very different kind of conversation than the one we'd had in her backyard. Half of her hair was gone, and I mean gone. Not styled short, not cut into some trendy bob, but literally hacked off in jagged chunks like Crystal had been using those safety scissors blindfolded during an earthquake. The other half was still relatively intact, which somehow made it worse because it showed exactly what had been taken from her. Dad? She whispered, her voice cracking. Why did Aunt Crystal do that? I didn't do anything wrong. I was just standing there. And there it was. The question every parent dreads because the real answer is too dark and complicated for a 10-year-old to process. I couldn't tell her that her aunt was a narcissist who couldn't handle her own daughter not being the center of attention. I couldn't explain that some adults are basically children in expensive clothing who never learn to manage their emotions. I couldn't say that jealousy makes people do terrible things, and sometimes family members are the worst offenders because they feel entitled to get away with it. So I did what every parent does in that situation. I lied my ass off with the most comforting version of the truth I could manufacture. Sweetheart, some people have stuff going on inside them that makes them act in ways that don't make sense to normal people. It had nothing to do with you. You were perfect. You are perfect. She's just dealing with things badly. I brushed a strand of hair away from her face, careful not to touch the butchered side. But I promise you, and I mean really promise you, this isn't going to go unanswered. Okay. She nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve like the proper 10-year-old she was. Mom said it's just hair, and I shouldn't be upset. Of course she did. I took a deep breath and counted to 5 in my head. Your mom is trying to make you feel better. But you know what? It's okay to be upset. Someone did something mean to you, and you're allowed to have feelings about it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I stayed with her until she fell asleep, which took about 2 hours and involved reading 3 chapters of her current favorite book about dragons and teenage wizards. When I finally crept out of her room, it was almost 11 at night, and I was exhausted in that bone-deep way that comes from emotional turmoil rather than physical activity. Lila was already in bed, scrolling through her phone with that glazed expression that means she's avoiding thinking about real problems by looking at other people's fake perfect lives on social media. I went downstairs, poured myself a glass of water because I'm not much of a drinker and also needed to keep a clear head, and sat down at the kitchen table with my phone. That's when I decided to check Facebook, mostly because I had this nagging feeling that Crystal wasn't done being terrible for the day. And sure enough, there it was, posted about an hour ago. A selfie of Crystal looking all zen and peaceful with a caption that made my blood pressure spike so fast I'm surprised I didn't stroke out right there at my kitchen table. Kids gotta learn not to compete with others. Sometimes the best lessons come from unexpected moments. #blessed, #motherhood, #real talk. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from stress. This woman had just assaulted my daughter and was now posting philosophical garbage on social media like she was some kind of parenting guru who'd just imparted wisdom instead of trauma. The comments were already rolling in from people who had no idea what had actually happened, all agreeing with her about teaching kids humility and not letting them get big heads. My finger hovered over the comment section. I wanted to reply so badly. I had about 15 different responses drafted in my head, each one more scathing than the last. But then I remembered something my grandfather used to say. Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. Crystal was building my case for me, documenting her crazy in real time with a timestamp and everything. So instead of commenting, I took screenshots. Multiple ones. From different angles. I saved the post, saved the comments, saved everything. I even used one of those internet archive sites to make sure she couldn't delete it later and claim it never happened. Every piece of evidence carefully filed away like I was building a legal case, which, spoiler alert, I absolutely was. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else, which is my usual routine, but felt especially important that day. I needed to clear my head, needed to think, needed to plan. I made coffee, the good stuff, not the watered-down garbage Lila prefers, and stood at the kitchen window watching the sun come up over our suburban neighborhood, where apparently assault is considered teaching moments. When Zoe came downstairs around 7, still in her pajamas with her destroyed hair sticking up at weird angles, I was ready. I'd made her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse, because I'm a dad who can't draw anything more complicated than Disney characters, and had her chocolate milk already poured. She climbed onto the stool at the kitchen island and gave me this small, sad smile that broke my heart all over again. I put the plate in front of her, sat down across from her, and looked her straight in the eyes. "Sweetheart, I need you to know something," I said. "What happened yesterday was wrong. What Aunt Crystal did was wrong. And I promise you, and this is a Marcus Mitchell guarantee, which you know is better than any warranty at Best Buy, some people's karma just takes the scenic route. It might not happen today or tomorrow, but it's coming. Trust me." She nodded, taking a bite of pancake, and I saw something shift in her expression. A little bit of hope creeping back in, and I meant every word. Because while Lila might have wanted to sweep this under the rug and pretend we were all one big happy family, I was already 3 steps into a plan that would make Crystal regret ever picking up those scissors. Karma wasn't taking the scenic route. I was putting it on the express lane. There's this thing that happens when you're truly, deeply angry that most people don't understand. It's not the loud, explosive rage you see in movies where guys punch walls and flip tables while dramatic music plays. That's amateur hour, the kind of anger that burns out fast and leaves you with nothing but broken knuckles and regret. No, real anger, the kind that actually accomplishes something, is cold. It's calculated. It's the kind of fury that makes you wake up at 5 in the morning with a clear head and a to-do list that reads like a legal thriller. That's where I was living now, in this weird zen state of complete calm that was apparently freaking out everyone around me more than if I'd actually lost my mind at the party. Lila kept watching me like I was a bomb with a faulty timer, waiting for me to explode at any moment. She'd ask me how I was doing with this overly careful voice, like she was negotiating with a hostage taker, and I'd just smile and say, "Fine, honey," while internally organizing my growing collection of evidence into color-coded folders on my laptop. My coworkers noticed too. My buddy Jake from accounting asked me at lunch if everything was okay because apparently I was being weird, which I took to mean I wasn't complaining about my usual stuff like traffic and the guy who keeps microwaving fish in the break room. I'm great, I told him, taking a bite of my sandwich with the kind of calm that probably looked psychotic. Never better. He didn't look convinced, but he also didn't push it, which was smart because I was about 3 questions away from showing him my evidence spreadsheet, and nobody needs to see that level of organizational vengeance during their lunch break. The truth was, I'd spent the last 3 days doing what I do best, turning my obsessive attention to detail into a weapon of mass documentation. See, my day job is in project management, which basically means I'm professionally trained to break down complex situations into manageable tasks, track progress, and make sure everything is documented in triplicate. Most people use these skills to manage construction timelines or software rollouts. I was using mine to build a case against my sister-in-law that would make prosecutors weep with joy. I started with the basics. I went through my phone and found every photo and video from the party. Turns out, in the age of smartphones, there's no such thing as an undocumented assault. Someone's always filming, usually for Instagram stories they'll forget about in 24 hours. I had 3 different angles of the haircutting incident, including one from Uncle Vernon, who'd been recording the whole thing while somehow simultaneously eating barbecue chips. You could literally hear the crunching in the audio, which would have been hilarious if the content wasn't my daughter getting attacked by a grown woman with safety scissors. I made copies. Then I made copies of the copies. I uploaded everything to 3 different cloud services because I've seen enough legal dramas to know that evidence has a weird habit of disappearing when it's inconvenient for certain people. I created a timeline with timestamps for every event, from when we arrived at the party to when Crystal made her move to when we left. I even included the weather report from that day because, honestly, I was getting carried away and kind of enjoying it. Then came the witness list. I made a spreadsheet because of course I did, with the name of every adult who'd been at that party. Next to each name, I noted what they'd seen, whether they'd said anything about it afterward, and their contact information. I had 17 potential witnesses, including 2 who'd actually gasped out loud when Crystal started cutting, which I noted in a separate column labeled Visible Reactions. My attention to detail was approaching serial killer levels, except instead of planning a crime, I was documenting one that had already happened. The screenshots from Crystal's social media deserve their own folder. I didn't just save her "kids gotta learn" post. I went back through her entire Facebook history like I was researching for a documentary about terrible people. Turns out, this wasn't her first rodeo with crazy behavior. There were posts about her feuds with other parents at Emma's school, passive-aggressive comments about people who think their kids are special, and a concerning number of wine memes that suggested she had some issues with impulse control and alcohol. I documented everything, cross-referenced dates, and even found a post from 2 months ago where she'd complained about Zoe getting the lead in the school play over Emma. Pattern of behavior, ladies and gentlemen. That's what lawyers call it. And I was building a greatest hits album. Meanwhile, Crystal was apparently living her best life, completely oblivious to the storm I was quietly brewing in my home office. She kept posting on Facebook like nothing had happened, sharing recipes and motivational quotes about being a boss mom and living authentically. The family group chat, which I'd muted after the party but still checked religiously, was blowing up with her commentary on everything from politics to the proper way to organize a pantry. Then, about 4 days after the incident, she posted something that almost made me laugh out loud. It was one of those inspiration porn images with a sunset background and text that read, "Some people can't handle seeing others shine. That's their problem, not yours. Stay blessed." The lack of self-awareness was so profound I had to read it twice to make sure it was real. I was sitting at my desk at work when I saw it, and I actually felt my face do this thing where I couldn't tell if I was smiling or grimacing. My finger hovered over the comment section for a solid 30 seconds. I wanted to write something. Oh man, did I want to write something. I had about 47 different responses in my head, each one more savage than the last. Hey Crystal, does this apply to people who assault children? Or, interesting philosophy from someone who can't handle a 10-year-old getting compliments? Or simply LOL. But then I remembered my strategy. Stay calm. Stay quiet. Let her keep talking. Every post she made was another exhibit for my case. Another example of her complete lack of remorse or understanding of what she'd done. So instead of commenting, I did something that I knew would mess with her head way more than any confrontation would. I reacted with a thumbs up emoji. That's it. Just a simple, innocuous thumbs up that could mean anything from "I agree" to "I acknowledge your existence" to "I'm watching you, and you have no idea what's coming." The beauty of the thumbs up is its ambiguity. It's the Switzerland of emoji responses, technically neutral but somehow vaguely threatening when used in the right context. Within 5 minutes, my phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "Did you seriously just like Crystal's post?" "It's a thumbs up, not a like," I texted back. I'm being supportive of her journey towards self-awareness. "Marcus." "What?" "I'm staying calm like you wanted. Look at me, not making a scene." She didn't respond, which told me she knew exactly what I was doing but couldn't quite articulate why it bothered her so much. That was the thing about my new approach. It was technically what everyone wanted. I wasn't yelling, wasn't making dramatic gestures, wasn't sending angry messages or confronting Crystal in parking lots. I was being the picture of restraint and maturity. The fact that I was simultaneously building a legal case that could result in criminal charges was just a bonus that I kept to myself. The family group chat started getting interesting after that. Crystal would post something, usually some humble brag about Emma or a passive-aggressive observation about parenting, and I'd respond with a thumbs up. Every single time. My mother-in-law would share a recipe, thumbs up. My brother-in-law would post a photo of his new truck, thumbs up. Crystal would comment about how some people need to learn boundaries, and I'd hit her with that thumbs up so fast my phone probably got whiplash. It was driving them crazy. I could tell because the messages started getting weirder, more pointed, like they were trying to get a rise out of me. Crystal posted about how families should stick together through misunderstandings, and I gave her a thumbs up with the enthusiasm of a man who'd just finished filing a police report, which, spoiler alert, was exactly what I was planning to do. Uncle Vernon called me one evening, which was unusual because we usually only talked at family events while discussing sports or grilling techniques. "Marcus, buddy, you doing okay? Your wife's worried about you." "Never better," I said, sitting in my garage, my thinking cave, as I'd started calling it, surrounded by printed documents and highlighted legal statutes. "Just been busy with work. It's just the whole thing with Crystal and Zoe. That was messed up, man." "Yeah, it was," I agreed, my voice neutral as Switzerland. "Really messed up. So you're not mad?" "Oh, I'm furious," I said cheerfully. But being mad and screaming doesn't change anything. Action does. "Hey, quick question. You still have that video you took at the party?" "Oh, yeah? You want me to send it to you?" "If you don't mind. Just want to have a copy for Zoe when she's older. You know, memories." He said he'd send it over, and I added his video file to my collection with the satisfaction of a librarian completing a rare book set. Every piece of evidence was another nail in Crystal's coffin, and I was building something that would make IKEA furniture instructions look simple. That night, I sat in my garage, a place that had become part war room, part therapy office, and looked at the pile of hair I'd saved from the party. Yeah, I'd gathered strands of my daughter's hair from Crystal's backyard carpet because I'm apparently the kind of person who collects evidence like a crime scene investigator. I held them in my hand, these physical remnants of what had been taken from Zoe, and felt that cold anger settle even deeper into my bones. My phone buzzed. Another post from Crystal, this time about rising above negativity. I gave it a thumbs up, poured myself another coffee, and opened my laptop to the folder labeled Exhibit A Idiocy. Because here's what Crystal didn't understand. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means strategic. It means I'm not wasting energy on reactions when I could be building something that actually matters. And buddy, was I building something spectacular? There's something about sitting alone in a garage at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night that makes you reassess your life choices. Most guys my age use their garages for normal things. Working on cars they'll never actually fix, organizing tools they bought at Home Depot and used once, or hiding from their families while pretending to be busy with important man stuff. Me? I'd turn mine into what I can only describe as a command center for justified revenge, complete with a mini fridge full of energy drinks, a folding table covered in printed documents, and apparently a Ziploc bag containing strands of my daughter's hair because my life had officially crossed into territory that would concern a therapist. I was sitting in my camping chair, the fancy one with the cup holder that I bought for tailgating and had used exactly twice, staring at that bag of hair like it held the secrets to the universe. Under the fluorescent light I'd installed after Lila complained the garage was too dark, Zoe's curls looked even more tragic, these beautiful auburn strands that had taken years to grow and seconds to destroy. I kept thinking about how she'd cried herself to sleep again that night, how she'd asked me at dinner if she could wear a hat to school tomorrow, how my brave, confident daughter had been reduced to someone who wanted to hide. That's when it hit me. Not like a gentle realization, but like one of those moment of clarity slaps you see in movies, except nobody was actually hitting me, and there was no dramatic music, just the sound of my neighbor's dog barking at literally nothing like it did every single night. I realized something incredibly simple, the kind of truth that seems obvious once you think it, but somehow gets buried under all the social pressure and family politics. If you let people treat your child like a punchline, they'll rewrite your whole life as a joke. Crystal had assaulted my daughter. And yeah, I was calling it assault because that's what it was, not a mistake, or a moment of poor judgment, or whatever sanitized language people wanted to use to make it more palatable. She'd physically restrained Zoe and cut off her hair as punishment for the crime of being pretty and well-liked. And now she was posting on Facebook about teaching life lessons while my kid was upstairs probably having nightmares about scissors. If I let this slide, if I just kept the peace like everyone was suggesting, what message was I sending? That Zoe didn't matter? That family connections were more important than protecting my daughter? That grown adults could abuse children as long as they were related to us? Yeah, that wasn't going to work for me. Not even a little bit. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Trent Morrison. Now, Trent and I go way back. We met at the gym about 5 years ago when he corrected my deadlift form and possibly saved me from a lifetime of back problems. He's one of those guys who's good at everything in an annoying way. He's a lawyer, he's in great shape. He's got a beautiful wife and 2 kids who are somehow both athletic and smart, and he makes really good chili that wins contests. Normally, I'd hate him on principle, but he's also genuinely nice and funny, which makes it impossible to maintain proper jealous resentment. More importantly, he was a damn good lawyer who specialized in personal injury and family law, and he had this quality I desperately needed. He thought like someone who grew up watching action movies and believed in actual justice, not just legal technicalities. I checked the time. 11:15 p.m. That was either too late or exactly the right time to call, depending on how you looked at it. I hit the call button before I could overthink it. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding alert despite the hour. Marcus? Everything okay, man? You usually only call this late when you need a spotter or your wife is mad at you. Both, actually, I said, and I could hear him laugh on the other end. But I need the lawyer version of you right now, not the gym buddy version. His tone shifted immediately, going from casual to professional in a heartbeat. What's going on? So I told him. The whole story, start to finish, from walking into the party with cupcakes to Crystal's scissor rampage to Lila telling me to let it go to the Facebook posts to my current situation of sitting in my garage like some kind of suburban Batman planning justice. I try to keep it factual, try not to let the emotion bleed through too much, but my voice cracked a little when I got to the part about Zoe asking if people would make fun of her at school. There was silence on the other end when I finished, the kind that made me wonder if the call had dropped. Then Trent started laughing. Not a little chuckle, but full-on, belly-deep laughter that went on for a solid 10 seconds. I'm sorry, he finally managed, still laughing. I'm not laughing at Zoe, I swear. I'm laughing at the absolute insanity of what you just described. Please, and I mean please tell me you filmed it. Please tell me you have evidence of this woman committing assault with bad fashion choices at a children's birthday party. I've got 3 different angles, timestamps, witnesses, and a collection of social media posts that would make a prosecutor weep with joy, I said, feeling a smile creep onto my face for the first time in days. I've also got the hair she cut off in a Ziploc bag, which I realize sounds insane, but seemed important at the time. That's actually not insane. That's perfect. Physical evidence. Marcus, my man, you've basically built half my case for me already. What exactly are you thinking here? What do you want to happen? That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? I leaned back in my camping chair, staring at the ceiling of my garage where I'd hung my old college football pennant and a world's okayest dad sign that Zoe had given me as a joke. What did I want? I want her to face actual consequences, I said slowly, working through it as I spoke. I want there to be a record of what she did so she can't just pretend it never happened. I want Zoe to see that when someone hurts you, you don't just take it because keeping the peace is more convenient for everyone else. And honestly, I want Crystal to spend at least one night unable to sleep because she's worried about what's coming, the same way she made my daughter unable to sleep because she's traumatized. So we're talking criminal charges, Trent said, and I could hear him getting excited, which probably said something about both of us. Assault on a minor, possibly child endangerment, depending on how we frame it. We could go civil too, emotional distress, therapy costs, whatever we can make stick. This is actually a pretty solid case, Marcus. Like, genuinely solid. I've seen prosecutors take worse to trial. The thing is, I said, and this was the part I'd been wrestling with, everyone's going to think I'm being petty. My wife already thinks I'm overreacting. The family's going to lose their minds. Her mother's going to give me the disappointed grandmother speech about forgiveness. I'm going to be the villain here. Trent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice had that serious quality that reminded me why he was good at his job. Let me ask you something. If some random woman at a park had grabbed Zoe and cut off her hair, would you press charges? In a heartbeat. Would you feel petty about it? Of course not. Then why does Crystal being family change that? If anything, it makes it worse. She's someone who was supposed to protect Zoe, someone Zoe trusted, and she used that position to hurt her. The fact that people are telling you to let it go because she's family is exactly why we have a legal system that doesn't care about family politics. Look, man, I get it. Family pressure is real. But you know what else is real? The fact that your daughter is going to remember how you handled this for the rest of her life. He was right. Of course he was right. That's the annoying thing about having friends who are good at their jobs. They tend to be right when you need them to be. So what do? I asked, feeling something settle in my chest, that last bit of hesitation finally evaporating. We file a police report first thing tomorrow, Trent said, and I could hear papers rustling on his end like he was already taking notes. You bring me everything you've got, videos, photos, witness list, social media posts, the hair in the Ziploc bag, which is weird, but I love it. We document everything officially, get it on the record. Then we see what the prosecutor wants to do with it. Best case scenario, they charge her. Worst case, we have everything documented for a civil suit. Either way, Crystal's going to have a very bad few months, and she's going to learn that actions have consequences. My wife is going to kill me, I said, but I was smiling. Your wife will get over it. Your daughter won't get over watching her dad choose family politics over protecting her. Trust me on this one. I've seen too many cases where the kid ends up in therapy at 25 because their parents taught them that keeping the peace is more important than their safety. We talked for another 20 minutes, going over details and strategy and what I needed to bring tomorrow. Trent was in full lawyer mode now, asking questions about exact timings and whether anyone had tried to stop Crystal and if there were any medical costs associated with fixing Zoe's hair. I answered everything while simultaneously taking notes on my phone because old habits die hard, and I was apparently incapable of having a conversation without documenting it. When we finally hung up, it was almost midnight. I sat in my garage for a few more minutes, looking at my evidence folders, my witness list, my carefully organized timeline of events. I thought about Zoe upstairs, probably asleep by now, but still dealing with the aftermath of Crystal's tantrum. I thought about Lila, who meant well, but was wrong about this. I thought about Crystal, posting her inspirational quotes and living her best life while my daughter struggled with the consequences of her actions. Then I stood up, stretched my legs because that camping chair was murder on my back, and walked into the house with the kind of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow, I was going to the police station. Tomorrow, I was turning all my careful documentation into official reports and legal filings. Tomorrow, Crystal was going to learn what happens when you mess with someone's kid and that someone happens to be really, really good at project management. I stopped by Zoe's room on my way to bed, peeking in to see her sleeping peacefully for once, her destroyed hair spread across the pillow. I made a silent promise to her that she'd never have to wonder if I had her back, that she'd never doubt whether protecting her was more important than keeping fake peace with terrible people. And then I went to bed, sleeping better than I had in days, Because nothing helps you sleep like finally making a decision you know is right, even if everyone else thinks you're crazy. Especially when everyone else thinks you're crazy. Waking up the morning after making a life-altering decision is weird. Most people would expect some kind of doubt to creep in, that little voice asking if maybe you're overreacting, if perhaps you should just let sleeping dogs lie, and all those other cliches people use when they're trying to convince themselves that doing nothing is the same as doing the right thing. But me? I woke up at 6 a.m. feeling more focused than I had since my wedding day, which is saying something because that day involved a lot of focus to avoid tripping during the ceremony and becoming a viral video. Lila was still asleep, which was perfect because I didn't need another lecture about family unity and letting things go. I got dressed in my best business casual outfit, the one I save for important meetings and apparently police stations, made coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and started gathering my evidence. Everything went into my laptop bag, the printed documents, the flash drive with all the videos, the witness list, the social media screenshots, and yes, the Ziploc bag with Zoe's hair, because apparently I was committed to this level of detail. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror while brushing my teeth and had this moment of clarity that I must have looked completely unhinged to anyone who didn't know the full story. Here I was, a 38-year-old project manager, preparing to file criminal charges against my sister-in-law over a birthday party incident like I was building a case against the mob. But then I thought about Zoe's face when she'd looked in the mirror after Crystal's attack, and suddenly I didn't feel crazy at all. I felt like the only sane person in a world that had normalized adults assaulting children as long as they were related. I left a note for Lila on the kitchen counter. Took the morning off work. Running errands. Back by lunch. Love you. Short, sweet, and technically not a lie since filing police reports definitely counts as errands. Just not the kind involving grocery stores or dry cleaning. The police station was a 15-minute drive from our house, in that part of town where municipal buildings cluster together like they're afraid to be alone. I'd driven past it 1,000 times, but never actually been inside, which I guess is a good thing because it means I'd successfully avoided getting arrested or needing to report crimes up until now. The parking lot was mostly empty at 7:30 in the morning. Just a few police cruisers and a minivan that probably belonged to some other suburban parent dealing with their own drama. Walking through those doors felt surreal. The lobby was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town police station. Linoleum floors that had seen better days, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look vaguely sick, and that distinctive smell of coffee, cleaning products, and bureaucracy. There was a desk sergeant who looked like he'd been doing this job since the Reagan administration, with gray hair and the kind of tired expression that suggested he'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. "Help you?" he asked, glancing up from whatever paperwork he was shuffling. "I need to file a police report," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "For assault on a minor." That got his attention. His eyes sharpened, and he straightened up in his chair like I'd just said the magic words that turned a boring Tuesday morning shift into something worth paying attention to. Assault on a minor? When did this occur? Last Saturday, at a birthday party. I could see him trying to work out whether this was serious or some kind of custody dispute nonsense, so I added, "I have video evidence, multiple witnesses, and physical evidence. The perpetrator is my wife's sister, and she cut off my daughter's hair with scissors while restraining her in front of 30 people." His eyebrows went up so high they practically disappeared into his hairline. She did what now? 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a small interview room that probably doubled as someone's storage closet, talking to Officer Patricia Mendez, who looked like she was in her early 40s and had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she dealt with actual criminals regularly and had very little patience for nonsense. I liked her immediately. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, reviewing the initial statement I'd given. "Your sister-in-law, Crystal Pemberton, became upset because your daughter was receiving compliments at her daughter's birthday party, and her response was to physically restrain your 10-year-old and cut off her hair with safety scissors." "That's exactly what happened," I said, pulling out my laptop. "And I have it all documented." I walked her through everything. First, the timeline. When we arrived, when the compliments started, when Crystal snapped. Then I showed her Uncle Vernon's video, and I watched her face go from professionally neutral to barely concealed shock as she watched a grown woman hack away at a child's hair while other adults stood around looking horrified. Jesus, she muttered, and then caught herself. Sorry, that's just wow. And this was unprovoked. Completely. Zoe was just standing there being a normal kid at a party. She didn't say anything to Crystal, didn't do anything to Emma. She literally just existed with nice hair. Officer Mendez watched the video 2 more times, taking notes. Then I showed her the other angles, the photos of Zoe's hair afterward, the text messages from other parents who'd been at the party expressing shock and concern. I showed her Crystal's Facebook posts, especially the one about teaching kids not to compete that she'd posted after the incident. She's basically confessing on social media, Officer Mendez said, and I could hear something like admiration in her voice. That's new. Usually people try to hide their crimes, not document them for the internet. She's a special kind of stupid, I said, and then remembered I was talking to a police officer and probably should maintain some level of professionalism. I mean, she lacks awareness of consequences. No, your first assessment was accurate. She clicked through more screenshots, shaking her head. Sir, this is one of the most well-documented assault cases I've seen outside of, like, bank robberies with security cameras. You've got video from multiple angles, witnesses, physical evidence, and the suspect posting about it online. Do you work in law enforcement? Project manager, I said. I'm just really organized. Clearly. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. I have to ask, are you sure you want to pursue this? I mean, obviously what she did was wrong, but this is family. Once we file this report and it goes to the prosecutor, there's no taking it back. Relationships will be damaged. Holidays are going to be awkward. I'd been expecting this question, had prepared for it during my garage thinking sessions. Officer Mendez, if a stranger at a park had grabbed my daughter and cut off her hair, would you be asking me if I was sure I wanted to press charges? No, she admitted. Then why does Crystal being related to me change what she did? If anything, it makes it worse. My daughter trusted her. We all did. And she violated that trust in front of 30 people, traumatized my kid, and then went on social media to brag about it. So yeah, I'm sure. I'm very, very sure. She nodded, something like respect crossing her face. All right then, let's do this properly. We spent the next hour going through everything in detail. She made copies of all my evidence, took my formal statement, got contact information for all 17 witnesses on my list, and carefully documented the physical evidence, including the hair, which she agreed was weird but useful. She asked questions about Zoe's emotional state, whether we'd sought medical attention for any injuries, if there had been previous incidents with Crystal. Just to be clear, Officer Mendez said as we were wrapping up, based on what you've shown me, I'm classifying this as assault on a minor. Given that the victim is under 12 and the assault involved restraint and the use of an implement, even if it was just safety scissors, the prosecutor will likely take this seriously. Ms. Pemberton will be contacted, probably later today. She'll need to come in for questioning. Depending on how that goes and what the prosecutor decides, charges could be filed within the week. Good, I said, and meant it. You understand this is going to cause significant family conflict? It already caused significant family conflict when she assaulted my daughter. I'm just making sure there are consequences for it. She actually smiled at that. Fair enough. You'll get a call when we have updates. In the meantime, if Ms. Pemberton contacts you or tries to intimidate you or your family, document everything and call us immediately. I thanked her, shook her hand, and walked out of that police station feeling lighter than I had in days. The morning sun was bright, the air was crisp, and somewhere across town, Crystal was about to have a very bad day. The thought made me smile. My phone buzzed as I got to my car. A text from Trent. How'd it go? Better than expected. I typed back. Officer said it's one of the best documented cases she's seen. They're contacting Crystal today. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. This is why I tell people to document everything. You basically did my job for me. I drove home taking the scenic route, in no particular hurry. I stopped at Dunkin' Donuts and got Zoe's favorite, a chocolate frosted donut with sprinkles. Because if there was ever a day that deserved a surprise treat, it was the day her dad officially stood up for her in a way that couldn't be ignored or swept under the rug. When I got home, Lila was in the kitchen making breakfast, still in her robe. She looked at me suspiciously when I walked in. What errands? She asked. Just some administrative stuff, I said cheerfully, holding up the Dunkin' Donuts bag. Got Zoe a surprise. Marcus, what did you do? I filed a police report against your sister for assaulting our daughter. Want some coffee? The look on her face was somewhere between horror and resignation, like she'd known this was coming but had been hoping I'd chicken out. You didn't. I absolutely did. Complete with video evidence, witness statements, and physical evidence. The officer said it was one of the most well-documented cases she'd seen. I'm basically an overachiever at this point. Marcus, Lila, we can have this argument, but the report's already filed. Crystal's going to be contacted by the police today. This is happening. The only question is whether you're going to keep trying to convince me I'm wrong, or if you're going to realize that protecting our daughter is more important than protecting your sister from the consequences of her own actions. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, then opened it again, then just shook her head and poured herself more coffee, which I took as progress. Zoe came downstairs a few minutes later, and I handed her the donut with a smile. Special delivery for my favorite daughter. I'm your only daughter, Dad, which makes you automatically my favorite. It's basic math. She giggled, and the sound made every awkward conversation and uncomfortable police station visit worth it. Because that's what this was really about, making sure my kid knew that when someone hurt her, I'd move heaven, earth, and the entire legal system to make it right. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Officer Mendez. Ms. Pemberton has been notified and is scheduled to come in this afternoon. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled, took a bite of my coffee, and thought about Crystal's face when she got that call. Operation Quiet Storm was officially in motion. There's this thing about suburban neighborhoods that people don't tell you until you're already trapped in a 30-year mortgage. Information travels faster than gossip at a middle school lunch table. Seriously, you could sneeze in your backyard on a Tuesday afternoon, and by Wednesday morning, 3 different neighbors would be asking if you needed allergy medication recommendations and whether you'd considered getting your air ducts cleaned. So when Crystal got that call from the police station asking her to come in for questioning about assaulting a minor, the news spread through our community like wildfire in a drought. Fast, destructive, and absolutely impossible to contain. I first noticed things changing on Wednesday morning, exactly 2 days after I'd filed the report. I was getting ready for work when my phone started blowing up with text messages from people I barely talked to. My neighbor Dave, who I'd maybe exchanged 3 words with beyond nice weather in the 5 years we'd lived here, sent me a message that just said, Dude, is it true about Crystal? Then came messages from parents from Zoe's school, people from the neighborhood Facebook group that I'd muted years ago, but apparently was still a member of, and even my dentist receptionist who somehow heard about it through her sister, who knew someone who worked at the police station. The story was everywhere, and it was growing with each retelling like some kind of suburban legend. The basic facts were there. Crystal cut Zoe's hair at a birthday party, but people were adding their own creative flourishes. One version had her using actual fabric scissors. Another claimed she'd done it because of some ancient family feud. My personal favorite was the one where apparently I'd remained eerily calm throughout the whole thing, which made me sound like some kind of revenge-plotting supervillain instead of just a dad with decent impulse control and a really good lawyer. But the real entertainment was watching Crystal's carefully constructed queen of the neighborhood image crack like an egg dropped from a 3-story building. This woman had spent years cultivating this persona of the perfect suburban mom. PTA president, charity event organizer, the lady who always volunteered to bring homemade cupcakes and never, ever use store-bought frosting because apparently that's a personality trait now. She had a following, actual literal followers who treated her like some kind of lifestyle guru because she knew how to coordinate throw pillows and post inspirational quotes about wine consumption. All of that started crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. The PTA moms were the first to jump ship, and let me tell you, watching the exodus was more satisfying than any revenge movie I'd ever seen. These were the same women who'd been liking all of Crystal's posts, commenting on her photos with strings of heart emojis, and probably secretly competing to be her best friend. Within 48 hours of the news breaking, I watched her Facebook friend count drop like a stock market crash. We're talking about a loss of 37 friends in one day, which I know because I was petty enough to check multiple times and keep a mental tally. Jennifer Morrison, who'd been Crystal's co-chair on the spring fundraiser committee, posted a vague status about being shocked and disappointed by people you thought you knew, which was suburban mom code for, I'm publicly distancing myself from Crystal without actually naming names because I still want to maintain plausible deniability. Within an hour, 15 other PDA moms had liked and commented, all expressing similar sentiments about trust and character in protecting children, like they were auditioning for a very boring version of Law and Order, PDA unit. The neighborhood Facebook group, which I'd reopened specifically to watch the drama unfold because I'm only human, was an absolute disaster zone. Someone had posted asking if anyone knew anything about the incident at Emma Pemberton's party, and the comments section exploded faster than a shaken soda can. People were sharing their own Crystal stories, incidents that had apparently been bothering them for years, but nobody had wanted to bring up because she was too socially powerful. Turns out, Crystal had a history of being terrible that everyone had just been tolerating. Karen Shin shared a story about how Crystal had tried to get her daughter kicked off the soccer team because she was too competitive and making Emma look bad. Michelle Rodriguez talked about how Crystal had spread rumors that her homemade tamales for the multicultural potluck were actually store-bought because apparently authentic cooking threatened her somehow. Even Quiet Susan Park, who I'd never seen post anything more controversial than pictures of her garden, wrote a 3-paragraph essay about how Crystal had made her cry at a bake sale over the proper way to display brownies. It was like watching a dam break, except instead of water, it was years of pent-up frustration with a woman who'd been using her social status to terrorize people with better hair than her daughter. The common thread in all these stories was that Crystal couldn't handle anyone, adult or child, outshining Emma in any way. She'd been pulling this jealous behavior for years, but the haircutting incident was apparently the line that finally made people say, okay, that's too far, even for Crystal. Meanwhile, back at home, Lila was having what I can only describe as a full-scale meltdown about the whole situation. She'd been relatively quiet for the first day after I filed the report, probably processing or hoping it would all magically go away, but by Wednesday evening, she was in full crisis mode. "Marcus, you need to drop this," she said, cornering me in the kitchen while I was trying to make dinner. "This is getting out of control. Do you see what's happening? My sister is being destroyed on social media. People are unfriending her. The PDA moms are turning on her. This is too much." I continued stirring the pasta sauce, keeping my voice level. "Crystal destroyed herself when she assaulted our daughter. I just documented it. She's family, Marcus. Family." Lila's voice was getting that high-pitched quality that meant she was about 2 seconds away from either crying or throwing something. "You're supposed to protect family, not prosecute them." I turned off the stove and faced her directly, because this conversation needed my full attention. "Lila, honey, I love you. But your definition of family is seriously messed up. Family doesn't mean you get a free pass to abuse people. Crystal is family to us, sure. But you know who else is family? Zoe, our actual daughter. The kid who cried herself to sleep for 3 nights because her aunt attacked her at a party. So when you tell me I should protect family, which family member exactly are you talking about? That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is asking me to choose between protecting our daughter and protecting your sister from consequences she absolutely deserves. You want to talk about family? Fine. Let's talk about how Crystal has spent years being jealous of Zoe, making snide comments about her, competing with a literal child. Let's talk about how she posted on Facebook about teaching humility after she assaulted our daughter. Let's talk about how she's shown exactly zero remorse, hasn't apologized, and seems to think she was justified in what she did." Lila's eyes were watering now, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger or sadness or just the realization that I wasn't backing down. "So that's it. You're just going to destroy my relationship with my sister over this." "I'm not destroying anything. Crystal destroyed it when she decided that safety scissors were an appropriate response to childhood beauty. And you know what the really messed up part is? You're more worried about your relationship with your sister than you are about our daughter's trauma. Think about that for a second. She didn't have a response to that, just turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the kitchen with overcooked pasta and the satisfaction of being absolutely right even though it made everyone uncomfortable. The best part of all this, and yes, I'm petty enough to have a favorite part, was watching Zoe's response to everything. While Crystal was losing friends and social standing faster than a politician caught in a scandal, my daughter was actually thriving. We'd taken her to a professional stylist the day after I filed the report, a woman named Maria who'd heard about what happened and offered to fix Zoe's hair for free because apparently even hairdressers have a code about crimes against follicles. Maria had worked magic, turning the disaster Crystal had created into an adorable pixie cut that actually looked intentional and stylish. Zoe had stared at herself in the mirror for a solid 5 minutes, turning her head side to side, and then she'd smiled. Really smiled, not the fake one she'd been using since the party. "Dad," she said that evening, running her fingers through her short hair for the 100th time. "I think my head feels lighter." I grinned, feeling something warm spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee I'd been drinking. "That's what happens when you drop toxic people, sweetheart. Everything feels lighter." She thought about that for a moment, then looked at me with those serious eyes that sometimes made her seem way older than 10. "Is Aunt Crystal toxic?" "Like a waste dump, kiddo. Like a waste dump." By the end of the week, Crystal's social empire had basically collapsed. Her Instagram followers had dropped by half. The PDA had accepted her resignation from the board, and 3 different neighborhood moms had blocked her after she tried to spin the story in the group chat. The woman who'd strutted into that birthday party like she owned the world was now basically a pariah, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy watching every second of it. Because here's the thing about consequences. They're a lot like karma, except faster and more legally binding. Crystal had spent years thinking she was untouchable, that her social status and family connections meant she could do whatever she wanted without repercussions. Turns out, all it took was one dad with decent documentation skills and a complete lack of patience for bullies, even bullies who were related to him by marriage. Lila still wasn't talking to me much, but Zoe was smiling again. And given the choice between my wife's temporary anger and my daughter's long-term well-being, I'd choose Zoe every single time. Some people called it petty. I called it parenting. And honestly, the view from the moral high ground was pretty damn good. If you've ever been invited to a family peace dinner, you already know it's actually an ambush disguised as a potluck. It's the suburban equivalent of those mob meetings in movies where everyone smiles and passes the marinara while secretly planning who's getting whacked after dessert. So when Lila's mother called on Friday afternoon with her sweet, grandmotherly voice asking if we could all get together this weekend to talk things through like adults, I knew exactly what I was walking into. This wasn't going to be a dinner. This was going to be an intervention, a trial, and a guilt trip factory all rolled into one, served with a side of someone's mediocre casserole. "It'll be small," Patricia, my mother-in-law, assured me over the phone, which was already a red flag because nothing described as small by a woman who considers 20 people intimate has ever actually been small. Just family. "We need to clear the air before this gets any more out of hand." Out of hand. Like Crystal assaulting my daughter was just a minor miscommunication that could be fixed with proper dialogue and maybe some store-bought cookies. But I agreed to go because sometimes you have to walk into the lion's den to prove you're not afraid of lions, even when the lions are actually just your in-laws armed with passive aggression and Pyrex dishes. The dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening at Patricia's house, which was this massive colonial-style home in the fancy part of town where the houses all look like they're competing for the cover of Better Homes and Gardens. Patricia and her husband George, who I genuinely liked because he had the good sense to stay out of drama and focus on golf, had bought the place after George's dental practice took off, and she'd been using it as a venue for family gatherings ever since. Usually these events were fine, just normal holiday stuff with too much food and relatives asking when we were going to have another kid. But tonight was different. Tonight had an agenda, and I was pretty sure that agenda was titled, "Make Marcus Feel Bad and Fix Crystal's Life." We arrived at 6:30, fashionably late because I'd insisted on stopping for coffee first, much to Lila's irritation. Zoe was with us, wearing a cute denim jacket that covered her new pixie cut, though she kept touching it nervously in the car. I'd asked her if she wanted to stay with my parents for the evening, but she'd insisted on coming, said she wanted to see what happens, which made me both proud and concerned that my 10-year-old was developing a taste for drama. The moment we walked through the door, I could feel the tension thick enough to cut with one of Crystal's assault scissors. The living room was set up like a United Nations peace summit, with strategic seating arrangements that someone had clearly planned. Patricia was in her usual chair by the fireplace. George was standing by the bar looking like he wished he was anywhere else, and Crystal was on the couch with her husband Doug, who had the expression of a man who'd been drafted into a war he didn't understand. But the real surprise was the supporting cast. Lila's brother Marcus Jr. Yes, we have the same name, which has caused endless confusion at family events. Was there with his wife Stephanie. Lila's Aunt Carol had shown up, probably because she lived for this kind of drama. Even Doug's parents were present, sitting on the love seat looking uncomfortable and out of place, like they'd been called as character witnesses but weren't sure for which side. Marcus, Zoe, so glad you could make it, Patricia said with the kind of forced enthusiasm that flight attendants use when explaining emergency exits. She swooped in to hug Zoe, making a big show of complimenting her new haircut, while carefully not mentioning why she had a new haircut in the first place. Don't you look adorable? So stylish. Crystal was watching from the couch, and I caught her eye for just a second. She looked terrible, and I don't mean that in a petty way, though let's be honest, there was some petty satisfaction involved. Her hair was messier than usual, her makeup looked hastily applied, and she had this hunted expression like someone who'd spent the last week getting dragged on social media and was only now realizing that actions have consequences. Good. We did the awkward small talk dance for about 15 minutes while Patricia finished setting up the dining room. George tried to talk to me about a basketball game. Bless him, but even sports couldn't cut through the weird energy in that room. Zoe stuck close to my side, which told me she was picking up on the tension too. Kids are smart like that. They can sense when adults are about to have the kind of conversation that starts with, "We need to talk," and ends with someone crying in a bathroom. Finally, Patricia announced that dinner was ready, and we all filed into the dining room like prisoners heading to their last meal. The table was loaded with food. There was a green bean casserole, some kind of chicken dish, mashed potatoes, rolls, and at least 3 different salads because apparently we needed options. It was the kind of spread that screamed, "I'm trying so hard to make this seem normal," which just made it more obvious that nothing about this evening was normal. We sat down in what were clearly assigned seats. I ended up directly across from Crystal, which felt intentional. Lila was next to me, practically vibrating with anxiety. Patricia was at the head of the table, like she was chairing a board meeting, and George was at the other end looking like he was calculating how quickly he could excuse himself to check on something in the garage. Patricia led us in saying grace, which lasted approximately 3 times longer than normal and included specific mentions of forgiveness, family bonds, understanding, and moving forward, which told me exactly where this evening was headed. When she finally said, "Amen," I echoed it with enough enthusiasm to make it clear I was just being polite, not actually agreeing with her subliminal messaging. We started eating in what might have been the most uncomfortable silence I'd experienced since my last dental surgery. The only sounds were forks scraping plates and someone's phone buzzing repeatedly until they finally silenced it. This went on for maybe 5 minutes before Patricia decided it was time to get to the real purpose of the evening. "So," she began, setting down her fork with purpose, "I think we all know why we're here. We've had an unfortunate incident, and I believe it's time we addressed it as a family. Crystal has something she wants to say." I looked at Crystal, who was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, even though I was pretty sure she wasn't actually crying yet. She took a shaky breath, and I braced myself for whatever performance was about to happen. "Marcus, Lila, Zoe," Crystal started, her voice trembling like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "I want to apologize for what happened at Emma's party. I was overwhelmed, I wasn't thinking clearly, and I made a terrible mistake. I never meant to hurt Zoe. I love her. She's my niece. And I'm so sorry." The tears started flowing then. Or at least, she made a good show of wiping at her eyes and sniffling. Doug put his arm around her shoulders in what I'm sure was supposed to be a supportive gesture, but mostly looked like he was physically holding her together. Everyone at the table was looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to accept this apology and declare that all was forgiven and we could all move on and pretend this never happened. Except I wasn't buying it. Not even a little bit. "Okay," I said, taking a bite of mashed potatoes. "Thanks for the apology." The table went quiet. That wasn't the response they wanted. Lila elbowed me under the table, which I ignored. Patricia cleared her throat. "Marcus, don't you think it's time to let this go? Crystal has apologized. She's learned her lesson. This police business is tearing our family apart. Surely we can handle this within the family without involving the authorities." "Handle it how exactly?" I asked, my voice conversational. "Like we handled all those other times Crystal got jealous of Zoe? Like we handled it when she spread rumors about her at school?" Like we handled it when she tried to get Zoe kicked out of the school play? Because from where I'm sitting, handling it within the family has just meant enabling Crystal to keep escalating her behavior until she finally crossed a line so big that even you can't pretend it didn't happen. Marcus, Lila hissed, but I was just getting started. Patricia's face was getting red. This is about forgiveness, Marcus. It's about family. We need to support each other, especially in difficult times. What Crystal did was wrong. Yes, but involving the police. Making this public? That's vindictive. That's not what family does. I set down my fork and looked directly at my mother-in-law. You're right. It is about forgiveness. And I already forgave her. I paused, letting that sink in. The police station didn't. The silence that followed was so thick you could have used it for insulation. Someone's fork clattered against their plate. George made a noise that might have been a suppressed laugh. Zoe was looking at me with something like awe. Crystal's crying intensified, though I noticed she kept checking to see if people were watching her. How can you say you forgive me and then try to have me arrested? She sobbed. Pretty easily, actually, I said. Forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences. It just means I'm not going to spend my life being angry at you. But you assaulted my daughter. You restrained her and cut off her hair because you were jealous that people thought she was pretty. That's not a family disagreement, Crystal. That's a crime. And crimes get reported to the police. That's how society works. Doug finally spoke up, his voice tight. This is going to ruin our lives. Do you understand that? Crystal could get a criminal record over this. She could lose her job. This could affect Emma. Then maybe Crystal should have thought about that before she decided to attack a 10-year-old with scissors, I replied. Actions have consequences, Doug. That's literally the first thing we teach kids. But apparently Crystal missed that lesson, so now the legal system gets to teach it instead. Lila's Aunt Carol, who'd been quiet up until now, decided to chime in. You're being petty, Marcus. This is petty revenge dressed up as righteousness. I looked at her, then around the table at all of them. These people who wanted me to just let it go, to prioritize Crystal's comfort over my daughter's justice, to teach Zoe that family loyalty means accepting abuse. Petty, I said, and I let myself smile. No, Carol. Petty would be posting about this on Facebook. Petty would be spreading rumors. Petty would be cutting someone's hair at a party. I paused. What I'm doing isn't petty. It's precise. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue more, but George, wonderful, sensible George, stood up and said, I think maybe we should move on to dessert. Patricia made pie. The rest of the dinner was painfully awkward, but I didn't care. I'd said what needed to be said. Zoe was still at my side, still safe, still learning that her father would always choose protecting her over making other people comfortable. And that was worth any amount of family dinners from hell. There's a special kind of satisfaction that comes from watching karma punch someone in the face, especially when you're the one who introduced karma to that person's address. It's like watching a movie you've already seen, but enjoying it even more the second time, because you know all the good parts are coming. That's exactly how I felt Monday morning when I accidentally happened to be at the police station at the exact same time Crystal and Doug were scheduled for their official interview with the detectives handling the case. Okay, fine, it wasn't an accident. Officer Mendez had called me the day before to let me know when Crystal would be coming in, and while she didn't explicitly say I should show up, she also didn't explicitly say I shouldn't, which in my interpretation meant I had a standing invitation to witness justice being served in real time. So I took a long lunch break from work, told my boss I had an important appointment, which wasn't technically a lie, and drove to the police station with a coffee from Starbucks and the kind of anticipation usually reserved for playoff games and Black Friday sales. I arrived at exactly 10:47 a.m., which was 13 minutes after Crystal and Doug's scheduled appointment time, because showing up late to someone else's worst day is peak petty, and I was absolutely operating at peak levels. The parking lot had more cars than last time I was here, including a silver Lexus SUV that I recognized as Crystal's because she'd posted about 17 Instagram photos of it when she first bought it, all with captions about treating yourself and boss mom energy. That Lexus was now parked in a spot near the entrance, probably because Crystal had arrived early out of nervousness, which made me smile into my overpriced latte. The inside of the police station was busier than my first visit. There were a couple of people waiting in the lobby area, looking either bored or anxious depending on why they were there. The same desk sergeant from before, Officer Williams, according to his name tag, gave me a nod of recognition when I walked in, which made me feel like a regular at a restaurant, except instead of knowing my usual order, he knew I was here to watch my sister-in-law get questioned about assault charges. "Mr. Mitchell," he said with the hint of a smile. "Detective Harris is with Ms. Pemberton and her husband in interview. Room 2. Officer Mendez said you might stop by. Just wanted to see if there was any paperwork I needed to sign," I said, which was partially true. I did need to sign some additional witness statements. The fact that interview room 2 had a window that looked out into the hallway where I'd be doing said paperwork was purely coincidental. Purely. Officer Williams directed me to a desk with forms that definitely could have been mailed to me or signed electronically, but instead required my physical presence at the station during the exact time frame that Crystal was being interrogated. Funny how that worked out. The desk was positioned perfectly. I had a clear view through the window of interview room 2, though the glass was one way so Crystal couldn't see me watching. It was like having front row seats to the universe finally balancing its cosmic checkbook. I could see Crystal sitting at a metal table that looked like it had been through about 3 decades of police interrogations and budget cuts. She was wearing what I called her serious adult outfit, a navy blazer over a white blouse. Probably the same thing she wore to PTA meetings when she wanted to intimidate other parents into volunteering for bake sales. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and even from this distance, I could see the tension in her shoulders. Doug sat next to her in a suit that looked uncomfortable, like he'd grabbed it from the back of his closet where it had been living since their wedding and was now questioning all his life choices that had led to this moment. Detective Harris, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them, was sitting across from them with a folder open in front of her. I couldn't hear what they were saying through the glass, but I could read body language like a book, and this book was titled Two People Realizing They're in Serious Trouble. Crystal was crying, of course, because that was her go-to strategy for getting out of things. I watched her dab at her eyes with a tissue while Doug held her hand, both of them looking like they were attending a funeral for Crystal's reputation, which I guess they kind of were. Detective Harris remained completely unmoved by the waterworks, which told me she was very good at her job and had probably seen this performance before from other people who thought tears were a get-out-of-jail-free card. I was pretending to read the forms in front of me, something about witness testimony protocols that I'd already read online, when I saw Doug start gesturing animatedly. His face was getting red, and he appeared to be raising his voice, though I still couldn't hear through the glass. Detective Harris leaned back in her chair with her arms crossed, letting him tire himself out like a parent waiting for a toddler to finish a tantrum. Crystal put her hand on Doug's arm, probably trying to calm him down before he made things worse, which suggested she had at least some survival instincts left. The whole scene was fascinating in the way that watching a slow-motion car crash is fascinating. You know it's wrong to enjoy it, but you also can't look away. Here was a woman who'd spent years building this perfect image, cultivating her social media presence, positioning herself as some kind of suburban lifestyle guru, and now she was sitting in a police interrogation room explaining why she'd attacked a child with safety scissors. The irony was so thick you could serve it at Thanksgiving. I was on my second page of forms, actually signing them this time since I did need to complete them eventually, when the door to interview room 2 opened and Detective Harris stepped out. She walked directly toward where I was sitting, which made my heart rate pick up slightly, because even when you're the victim's father and completely in the right, something about a detective approaching you in a police station triggers that primal, "Am I in trouble?" response. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice professional, but with a hint of something that might have been amusement. "Officer Mendez mentioned you might be here. Do you have a moment?" "Of course," I said, standing up and following her to a small office down the hall. Once inside with the door closed, her professional demeanor cracked slightly, and she actually smiled. "I've been doing this job for 23 years, she said, sitting on the edge of her desk. "And I have never, and I mean never, had a case come across my desk that was this well documented by a civilian. You basically did our entire investigation for us. The prosecutor's office is going to love you. I believe in being thorough," I said modestly, though internally I was doing a victory dance that would embarrass my daughter. Thorough is an understatement. Most people show up with maybe a cell phone video and some emotional testimony. You showed up with a full multimedia presentation complete with timeline, witness statements, and physical evidence. If you ever want to change careers, we could use someone like you in the DA's office. I laughed. I'll stick with project management, but I appreciate the offer. How's it going in there? I nodded toward the interrogation room. Detective Harris's smile turned into something more like satisfaction. Ms. Pemberton is having a difficult time explaining her actions, which is not surprising given that there isn't really a reasonable explanation for assaulting a child. Her husband is trying to frame it as a mental health episode, which would be more compelling if she hadn't posted on social media about it afterward like it was a parenting win. We're about to wrap up, and I'll be recommending charges to the prosecutor. What kind of charges are we looking at? Misdemeanor assault on a minor, possibly child endangerment, depending on how aggressive the prosecutor wants to be. It won't be prison time, probably probation and mandatory counseling, but it'll be on her record. And given that this has already made local news, it's going to follow her around for a while. The local news. I'd seen the article online, local mom charged after birthday party haircut incident, and it had gotten surprising traction. The comments section had been brutal, with most people expressing shock that an adult would do something like this and questioning Crystal's fitness as a parent. A few people had tried to defend her, suggesting there must be more to the story, but they'd been quickly overwhelmed by the majority who thought cutting a kid's hair as punishment was absolutely insane. That works for me, I said. I just want there to be consequences. I want my daughter to see that when someone hurts you, you don't just accept it to keep the peace. Detective Harris nodded approvingly. You're a good father, Mr. Mitchell. Your daughter's lucky to have someone willing to stand up for her, even when it's uncomfortable. She stood up, signaling our conversation was ending. We'll be in touch as this moves forward. The prosecutor will probably want to meet with you and your daughter at some point, if you're comfortable with that. Absolutely. Whatever we need to do. I finished signing my paperwork and was walking back toward the exit when the door to interview room 2 opened again and Crystal and Doug emerged into the hallway. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, not maliciously. Okay, maybe slightly maliciously, but mostly just because I wanted them to know I was here, that I wasn't backing down, that this wasn't going away. Crystal saw me first. Her eyes widened, and her face went from upset to horrified in about half a second. Doug's expression shifted to anger, his jaw clenching as he steered Crystal toward the exit like he was trying to escape a dangerous situation. I took a slow sip of my coffee, which was cold by now, but I committed to the bid anyway, and gave them my brightest, most cheerful smile. Morning, guys, I said, my voice friendly enough to be mistaken for genuine if you didn't know better. Hope you brought good lawyers. Or better scissors, at least. Detective Harris, who was standing a few feet away processing some paperwork, turned away quickly, but not before I saw her shoulders shake with suppressed laughter. Crystal made a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a gasp. Doug looked like he wanted to say something. Probably something aggressive that would get him his own assault charge, but Crystal pulled him toward the exit before he could. I watched them leave, Crystal practically running to get out of there, and felt that warm glow of satisfaction that comes from knowing you've done the right thing even when everyone told you not to. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. I know you're at the police station. This is too much. I texted back, just making sure justice gets served. Also, their coffee here is terrible. Don't worry, I brought my own. She didn't respond, which meant she was somewhere between furious and resigned, but I'd deal with that later. Right now, I had paperwork to finish and a daughter to pick up from school who deserved to know that her dad had her back. Always, no matter how many family dinners turned awkward or how many in-laws stopped talking to us. I finished my cold coffee, signed the last form, and headed out into the sunshine with the kind of spring in my step that only comes from watching karma work exactly as advertised. Some people called it petty. I called it parenting. And the police? They called it justice. Works for me. Crystal got slapped with misdemeanor assault and child endangerment charges faster than you can say bad parenting decisions. Doug tried suing me for emotional distress, which was hilarious considering his wife traumatized my kid. I countered by suggesting he invest in acting lessons instead of lawyers. The local news ate it up. Birthday bash turns barber battle became their headline, and suddenly my co-workers were buying me coffee all week like I'd won some kind of championship. Trent framed the article in his office. Best part? A professional stylist saw the story online and gave Zoe a free makeover. She looked absolutely stunning, but better than that? She smiled again. Really smiled. A month later, the dust finally settled. Crystal and Doug moved 3 towns over for what they called a fresh start, which is code for running away from the consequences of our actions. Emma switched schools. The family group chat went silent. Patricia stopped calling. Lila eventually came around, though it took her seeing Zoe's therapy bills and hearing our daughter's nightmares to realize that protecting Crystal had cost us all more than any argument ever could. She apologized, actually apologized, for choosing her sister's comfort over our daughter's safety. Progress. The best moment came during Zoe's class presentation about someone who inspires you. She stood up there, confident in her stylish pixie cut, and told 30 kids, "My dad didn't make a scene. He made history." I got called to pick her up early because apparently that statement required a parent-teacher conference. But whatever. Worth it. Now, whenever someone tells me don't make a scene, I just grin and say what's become my personal motto. Don't worry, I don't make scenes. I make sequels. Because sometimes the quiet ones aren't weak. We're just saving our energy for when the spotlight's on the guilty and the cameras are rolling at the police station. Justice isn't loud. It's patient. And it always gets the last word.